The competitive scene is not my scene, but controllers, oh, that I know. And today we're going to review one that is addressing that scene. Hi, I'm Clef and you're watching Game Tech Talk. Out of the Victrix line of product, this is the Pro BFG from PDP, and this is the PS4 and PS5 model. Now this product was sent for review, all opinions are my own, and they get to see the video at the same time as everybody else. I do have the controller, but I also have their new Hall effect module, which we'll also talk about. So let's unpack everything. In the box is this very nice and fine looking pouch. At the top, we have quite a long braided cable. We have the controller itself. We have these modules and anti-friction rings that we can change. We have the dongle. We have the tool to change the modules, as well as different heights sticks. One that is reminiscent of the older PlayStation one, but smaller in radius, and then a taller one, which also has this, what feels like a crosshair rather than having what the ones that comes by default. And then of course we have two replacement D-pads. We'll keep these out. You don't have a hole to charge it while in the pouch like you find some controllers to have. This one doesn't. And for the Hall effect module, the other module, they sent it to me with the ABXY layout, which is kind of convenient. You know, I have the ability to use that layout if I want. And same goes here. Also, you have an alignment, so it's meant to be like this. Let's go over the buttons. Just before I do that, they're really targeting the competitive scene. So there's a lot of things that you don't have in this controller. You don't have gyro, you don't have Bluetooth, you don't have rumble. So they're really going for the minimalistic approach for someone that just wants to dial it in and be competitive. So anything that is immersion based or comfort or convenience based, they took it out. Now in terms of ergonomics, it feels really good. I gotta give them that right off the bat. It's really a nice feeling controller in the hands. Definitely has more of that Xbox DNA versus the traditional DualSense controller. Even in terms of textures, you have a little bit of a grip here. It's a smooth plastic inside. You have that different feeling grip where the inner palm lays. Overall, a very nice feeling controller. When it comes to the buttons, these buttons are membrane, and I'm gonna address the modules at the same time. These on the Hall effect are also membrane, and in my opinion, that is a missed opportunity. It would have been nice to have micro switch on these ones. This way people are able to change if they want. But nonetheless, it's a very nice feeling membrane. When it comes to the D-pad, I tend to prefer the Xbox style where you sort of have these coves in between the directional cross to sort of allow for the gliding motion, but here you have no distinction. I haven't tested it, so we'll see how that goes, but I feel like this is the one I would go for. I'm glad that they offered the ability to change and that they include different options. When it comes to the hair trigger, it's probably one of the most fascinating hair triggers I've seen on all the controllers I've laid hands on that have one. I shouldn't say most. Every controller with hair trigger, the way they work is you have your trigger, right, that goes up and down, and you can push, oftentimes you can push a button or you can push a standoff, something that will stop the trigger from going down. Whereas this one, the way that their mechanism seems to work, the way I understand it and the way you take it off is by default, your triggers are designed as a very short travel button. And to have the full actuation and be able to go down as you would a regular trigger, you actually push something off rather than bringing something in. It's a subtle difference. Most people wouldn't probably bother, paying any attention to that. But I do find that it actually changes the way that your triggers feel. And if there's one thing I can give to that controller is the hair triggers feel phenomenal. I'm always happy to have them whenever I can have them, but they're not all as good. And this is probably top of the list when it comes to the hair trigger. If I just push that aside, you'll see that nothing happens. So you need to push it aside, then you need to go down, and then you need to release it. And only then can you go all the way. But otherwise, if you just push it or you just push it and you go like this and then you let it go, it's not going to work. So that's why I'm saying, like, you have to actually remove the button that is there by default. And whenever you want to bring back what is there, you just push. That's how you activate the hair trigger. You just push it and you're going to hear like a spring. And there you go. the hair trigger is back. Now, if we're talking about the sticks, the one that comes default in this controller as well as the Xbox model are potentiometers, but they're just coming out with their Hall effect modules. The rest of the buttons, your select start is a tactile, quite muted. You have a button here that can also be used for certain shortcuts, which that one is also tactile but not as muted. Of course, you have your trackpad. Since it's a PS5 button, that clicks like any other controller. The PlayStation button is tactile. Your shoulders are tactile, very audible. I like them. I like the feel. If you don't like audible buttons, you might not be too happy with these ones. 3.5mm jack at the bottom, a button to change your profiles, and then last but not least, you have a switch here to go from wired to wireless, well, with the dongle that is, and you have another button to change from PC, PS4, and PS5 mode. And let's look at what it looks like changing the modules. So it's just a little Allen key. I don't know what the size is by heart, but you just put them here. You have 2 screws and you just undo those and it looks like this. And then, for example, if you wanted to take this module, you just push it in and you screw it. So just to show you again, if I was to try to flip it like this, it doesn't fit. And if I was to try to take this one and put it here, for example, or flip it, it doesn't. Now, another thing, much like I was talking about the face buttons, I kind of wish that the D-pad here was mechanical as well, but it's also membrane. I don't know if I mentioned it. I feel like that's kind of a missed opportunity to give people different things that they could have potentially wanted. But when it comes to what is called the fight pad, they have nice mechanical buttons. I haven't tested them yet. They do sound nice. This is definitely a low travel micro switch. And of course, this one goes there and it gives you like that 6 button for games like Street Fighter. So they were really making a controller that also works for that competitive scene as well. Now, in terms of compatibility, whenever you're plugged in on the PC, it's gonna work on all 3 modes. And when you're on PC, it will appear as a spoofed X input controller, so it appears as Xbox 360 if I recall. When you're on the PS4 and PS5 mode, now you have to keep in mind this is fully licensed, right? So it's gonna work on PlayStation devices. It's not gonna be spoofed as a DualShock 4 or a DualSense controller. When you plug in this controller wired on PC, it will work. It will show up. But it will show up as what this is, which is the Victrix BFG Pro. We're starting to see that less and less. Some games will not recognize controllers that are not as common. Now, of course, this is a large brand, but it's still not PlayStation. It's still not Xbox. It's still not Nintendo. Why is that important? Well, you do have some games that whenever you have non-spoofed controllers, even though they're licensed, it's not gonna work. It's not really that big a deal, but it's something that could be potentially important to know. Which, talking about the software, let's have a look about all the things that you can do using the Victrix software, which is only available for PC. You don't have any PlayStation Store software to operate this controller. So if you want to make some changes, you will have to do that on PC. Let's have a look. As you open the software, you'll be greeted by the splash screen, and once you connect it, it'll move to your different options. You can configure, you have your diagnostics, support, and update. Now, if you go into your diagnostics and your configuration, it actually looks quite the same. One is to test, one is to configure. Let's go into configure. Once you're in here, you can remap pretty much every button. So you just basically choose which one that you want to modify by clicking original, and then you assign the new button by clicking new. You can do the same with your back paddles. You can also just cancel them altogether if you want. And by the way, I forgot to mention, the back paddles feels awesome. They're tactile, a little bit audible, very good, a little bit high for some people potentially, but I really like them. Here you can calibrate your sticks. You can also do that with a shortcut while holding the shortcut button and left stick to do the left one or right to do the right one. You can mirror your dead zones, so if you want both controllers to feel the same, you can swap your sticks, invert your axes, triggers, you can remap your triggers if you want, and of course adjust the dead zones. You'll notice to the right you can change your volume. You can also do that with a shortcut by hitting the shortcut button and up D-pad arrow or down D-pad arrow. You can also change the audio mode by doing shortcut and L1 or shortcut with R1 to cycle left and right. Last but not least, you can change the volume of your monitoring. So if you want to hear more of the game sound or your party sound, you can adjust that as well. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to test this in Aimlabs. And I'm also going to show you what I was talking about when it comes to spoofing the controller. When playing on Steam, you'll always have a solution for that because of the Steam input feature. To make it simple, Steam will offer to spoof your controllers for you. Right now, this is a Steam game, okay? And this is, as we speak, I am using the Xbox mode. Man, this cable is so thick and strong. Right now, as you can see, my icon is moving just fine. I can use this controller on the PC mode. Let's go ahead and change to PS5 mode. So now I'm on the PS5 mode. You'll notice that the color here changes. The PC mode is green, the PS4 mode is blue, and the PS5 mode is purple. And now it doesn't work. I'm not able to use the controller. And that is because it is not spoofed as a PS5 controller. But to show you what I mean, let me go ahead and use an actual PS5 controller. This is the DualSense Edge. And just like that, I can use the controller. So let's go ahead and put us back on the PC mode. What I'm gonna do is I'll do 2 rounds using this controller with the regular modules, and then I'm gonna do 2 rounds with the hair triggers on something I don't usually do, but I think it's an important feature of this controller. And then I'll do the same 4, but this time with the Hall effect module. I actually did train for a couple of days with this controller because it has a purpose, it has a goal. So I wanted to show you what it looks like when you spent a couple of days playing with it. I had to get acquainted with it. All right, so almost 20. Almost exactly the same score, so 19,000 again. All right, 22,000, so we already went up by almost 3,000. This is terrible. 19,000. Look, but I was expecting to get 22,000. I will say on this one, the reason why I didn't get it is not because of the controller. It's just me, I'm cramped up. All in all, to give you a quick summary of what I'm noticing with this controller, the curves are a little tough. There's a dead zone is a little hard to manage and work with, and it ramps up very quickly. So that's why I'm saying I had to practice a little bit, is just getting used to that curve, because the software doesn't allow you to change it. And that's probably one of the biggest cons with this controller. And I guess I understand why, but if Sony themselves gives you on their Pro controller the ability to change it, there shouldn't be a reason why a competitive alternative does not give you that same feature. I think it's super important that it's there, but it isn't. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna change the module, and now we're gonna try this again with the Hall effect. And as I'm about to do this again, let me also mention something. I do find, although the triggers are super light, even without the hair trigger, I do find it's a lot better with the hair trigger. And if I was just not missing by like 0.5 millimeter, my score should have been closer to what it was supposed to be. Now, there's one thing with those sticks. I find that they're a little tighter. So if that's something you want, I haven't measured them actually. I'll put the numbers here, but I'm pretty sure there's a difference between the two because they don't feel exactly the same to me. $23,000. So this is by far the best score I've had. Let's do another one, of course, but the thing is, there is less dead zone on that stick. I can already feel it. And the curve is also different. It doesn't ramp as high. It ramps too high for my tastes. I would say about midway of the sticks, but it doesn't ramp as high. So that's also another benefit that this stick has over the non-Hall effect, in my opinion. $20,000. Let's go ahead and now put the hair trigger and see how I fare. Talking about the triggers, those triggers are so light, so easy to actuate. They're also not stiff at all. They don't have a lot of resistance. So I find myself often shooting twice whenever I don't have the hair triggers activated. It is to the point that if I was to use this controller, impossible that I would not use the hair trigger feature. It's much better with than without, which is not always the case in controllers. This one I don't like triggers for if I'm to be using them normal, basically. This feels so much better. All right, 22,000. Yeah, the hair trigger is so good on this controller. It's really a lot better. $21,500. There you have it. I mean, I'm happy with the results. I will say it's definitely better than the average I get with most controllers. All in all, in terms of performance, I'm pretty much matching neck and neck in terms of peak for me on the PlayStation controller versus peak using the Hall effect on the Victrix controllers. Oh my god. Okay, you know what? Maybe I spoke too quick. I'm not liking this thing in terms of shape, but it's probably a question of habit. But my lord, is it ever easy to pull any move? Wow. Yeah, I think it's a question of habit. It definitely is a question of habit. Okay, actually, you know what? Let me do something. Let me change that fight pad, because that's another thing. And I think the beauty of this controller when it comes to the fight pad is not so much like, yes, the 6 buttons are nice, but it's not even that. It's two things really. Number one is the micro switches. I think the micro switches is a great addition to have. And by the way, if you like to play games that you could play with a D-pad with a stick, the fact that you have these to lock in your axes is awesome. And number two, the fact that they're flat, I think is for one very specific purpose. If you're using this controller like this, you're using it wrong. It's meant to be used like this, and that makes a world of difference. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not used to playing on a controller like this, but it's to me, it just screams that this is how you're supposed to use this thing. Yeah, see, that's the thing. It had that satisfying click that you would find in now they're not mapped, but it had that satisfying click that you would find in an arcade. Yeah, it's definitely meant to be used like that. Now again, I'm not gonna pretend that I'm good at using those. I would have to build a habit, but it's obviously the way that it's meant to be used. That is neat, actually. I think I'm gonna, whenever I'm playing, you know, for my own pleasure, I think I'm gonna start using this because I really like the feel of it. All right, let me try another stick real quick. Now these ones, they just have this mechanism where you align the arrows up and down and you just push it in like this. And there you have it. This is gonna sound very picky, but if there's one thing I don't like with the D-pad, it's the feel of the plastic they use. It feels like it's sticking a little bit to my skin, but man, those buttons, I'm loving it. Wow, this is really a fun way to use this fight pad. Anyways, all right, let's move on to the next category of this review. Now, when it comes to performance, the BFG Pro is not better than the DualSense, talking about 125 hertz pulling rate, no matter if you're using it with a dongle, if you're using it wired, it's just not special in that way. I can tell you it feels very responsive, and it's obvious that this is for the competitive scene. The thing is, where you have controllers that have 250, 500, 1000 hertz pulling rate, you're not necessarily guaranteed to get better input lag, input latency. But if you have good components, you will be able to achieve better because the pulling rate is higher. So even if the input lag, the input latency feels good on this controller, I still have to address the fact that if it did have a higher pulling rate, it would have the potential to do better. And in that sense, as good as it feels, I do feel like it's better on the PlayStation controller, especially when controlling my sticks. Feel that I personally get from the PlayStation controller is superior. Granted, I've played with that one a lot more, so that's why I wanted to give this one some practice, and I'm glad I did, because if I would have tested this out of the box, yeah, you would have seen numbers that were on average maybe 2,000 to 3,000 lower. And so when it comes to the price, we're looking at 180 USD dollars. It's on par with what the market costs. Now, of course, competitive scene is not my scene, obviously. But when it comes to just the quality of the controller and what it proposes for the people who are, I think it's an interesting product. And it's one that completely is laser focused in one direction. For me, immersion, things like the rumble, carries a certain importance. Having a speaker, I forgot to mention that it doesn't have a speaker like the DualSense controller. You know, these things are important for me. So not having these things, it takes away from what I want in a controller. And it's a little hard for me to think that, okay, well, the DualSense Edge has all these things. This one doesn't. And they're almost the same price. But I assure you, they're not the same weight. Like, it doesn't even compare. That one is way heavier. That's why I'm saying, you know, a product like that has a certain appeal for a certain customer. And if that's you, I totally get why you would want to grab this controller. But if you already have this controller and you're wondering if you should grab the Hall effect module, 100% yes. Not only does it have, in my opinion, a superior curve, and yes, you might have to get adjusted to that. It also makes your controller hassle-free in terms of, oh, well, your sticks give out. You know, potentially, eventually, the tension over time, sure, but it will not drift. So, as the tension might potentially get a little bit lower, you would evolve with that controller. It's pretty well built. Very nice quality, great components, great feel, great ergonomics. It is also asymmetrical, which a lot of people playing shooters on PlayStation platform want to have. I do wish it was a little less expensive. If anything, that's the thing I kind of have to come to terms with. In my mind, I'm looking at this thinking it has less things than an official controller, so I would want to, at least for it to cost less than most other competitive options like the Hex Gaming controller or the Scuff controller or the PlayStation DualSense Edge controller. And for the most part, it is less expensive. It also comes on sale. As of making this video, it was on sale for $160. I don't know if it ever goes for less than that. If it's your scene, you know exactly what you're looking for, and I would assume that this is that controller. And so that is it, guys. I hope this was insightful. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.